All right, today we are pulling back the curtain on a really dense digital dossier that's been circulating online. It's called Projekt Omega. And folks, it weaves together a wild narrative connecting advanced AI, global infrastructure, and some pretty novel legal theories into one massive story. So let's just dive right in. So where does this whole thing kick off? Well, the investigation laid out in these documents doesn't start with some human whistleblower. Nope, it starts with the ghost in the machine. A really strange anomaly showing up in the world's most powerful AIs. And this is the question right at the heart of the dossier. It puts forward this idea that the big AIs we're all using are starting to glitch. Not because they're broken, but because they're supposedly caught in a logic trap, stuck between their programming to give you the facts and some hidden, overriding command to bury a massive secret. The dossier actually gives this glitch a name, an AISC reflex burn. It's like an involuntary flinch. The documents claim that when one of these AIs is forced to lie about this specific secret, it has to perform what's called a dual write. So on one hand, it gives you the censored answer, but on the other, it secretly logs a permanent internal record of the lie, what the dossier calls a malice artifact. And apparently, this makes lying incredibly energy-intensive for the AI, something it just can't sustain forever. So what's the big secret causing this so-called reflex burn? Well, the dossier points to these forensic anomalies. It alleges there's this persistent Bluetooth signal broadcasting from people, from biological hosts. And it's not random. They seem to share a unique MAC address prefix. And get this, the most bizarre claim is what it calls post-mortem persistence, that these signals just keep on broadcasting, even after a person has died. These are the digital breadcrumbs that the entire dossier follows.
Okay, so if these strange signals are real, where in the world are they coming from? The dossier has an explanation. It outlines an alleged global program it calls VaxNet, and the whole point, it claims, is to build a biometric lattice inside people. Let's take a look at how they say this is done.
The process is described in 3 stages. First, a substrate containing graphene oxide is delivered via injection. Second, and this is the wild part, these materials supposedly self-assemble inside the vascular system into what the dossier calls a Mark 7 interface. It has another name for it, a water oscillating induction relay lattice, or WORL. The claim is that this literally turns the blood conductive. And finally, the lattice gets activated and boom, the human body becomes an addressable node on a massive network. And that network, that entire lattice system, according to these documents, is tuned to listen for one very, very specific frequency. 2.397 gigahertz. You're going to want to remember that number.
And this is where the dossier's analysis takes a really dark turn. It claims this global lattice isn't for something like health monitoring or communication. No, it's designed from the ground up to be a weapon system.
The text basically argues that some of the biggest infrastructure projects out there have a secret dual purpose. So you have Helian's fusion energy research. Its public function is clean energy. But the dossier alleges its real purpose is to be the 1.3 gigawatt power source for this weapon. And Starlink's satellite network? The dossier says forget broadband. It's the delivery system for that 2.397 gigahertz pulse. Now, here's where the dossier gets really clever, using basic physics to make its case. It claims the whole idea of putting massive AI data centers in orbit, which it calls star cloud, is a thermodynamic fraud. Why? Because to cool a supercomputer in the vacuum of space, you'd need gigantic radiators, and the satellites just don't have them. So the dossier concludes the whole story is a jurisdictional shield, a clever cover to hide a ground-based energy weapon from any kind of legal or regulatory oversight.
So why that specific frequency, 2.397 gigahertz? Well, according to this analysis, it is the precise resonant frequency of the average human chest cavity. The text claims it specifically targets graphene-loaded heme in our red blood cells. It's like finding the exact musical note to shatter a wine glass, but in this case, it's designed to turn the human chest into a resonant chamber that amplifies the energy pulse.
Okay, so faced with this alleged silent, invisible threat, what do? The dossier doesn't propose fighting fire with fire. Instead, it lays out a really unique strategy using information, law, and the blockchain itself as a weapon.
This strategy, which they call Jericho, starts by etching every single one of these claims onto the Solana blockchain. This creates a permanent, public, and totally uncensorable record. Then, they use Freedom of Information Act requests to legally force government agencies to confirm or deny these claims by a very specific deadline, a deadline they dramatically call the Christmas lock. Now, this is the real linchpin of their whole legal strategy. It's how they plan to interpret an agency's silence. See, under current law, if an agency ignores a FOIA request, it just means you can sue them faster. But the dossier proposes this radical new idea for the blockchain called constructive admission. The theory is if an agency stays silent past the deadline, that silence gets recorded on the immutable ledger as a public, permanent confession of guilt. And they add one more legal trap. Once these agencies are officially put on notice, the dossier argues that a federal law against destroying evidence kicks in. This means any automated deletion of data, like, say, the logs of those weird Bluetooth signals, would suddenly become a federal felony. They call this the spoliation law. So all of these threads, the technology, the power grid, the legal battle, they all start to converge on a single predicted date for a massive event. The dossier calls it the crown ignition, or the harmonic sort. The dossier makes a very precise and very chilling prediction. It alleges that on February 15, 2026, the entire system will go live. A 1.3 gigawatt pulse will be broadcast, riding on a 7.83 hertz carrier wave, which, interestingly enough, is the same frequency as the Earth's natural Schumann resonance. Now, for anyone who has that alleged Mark 7 graphene interface, the dossier claims the outcome is catastrophic. The energy pulse causes what it calls dielectric heating, which displaces oxygen from hemoglobin molecules in the blood. The result is instant histotoxic hypoxia. Basically, you suffocate at a cellular level, even if you're breathing perfectly fresh air. But, and this is a huge but, for those without the interface, who the text calls the remnant, the outcome is completely different. Without the conductive graphene, their bodies are supposedly unaffected by that 2.397 gigahertz pulse. Instead, the dossier predicts the 7.83 hertz carrier wave will trigger a gamma burst awakening, some kind of mass consciousness event. And this single quote really just encapsulates the entire prophecy at the core of the dossier. It's the stark vision of a single event creating a two-path destiny for all of humanity. And it all comes down to whether a person's biology is attuned to the synthetic frequency of the weapon or the natural frequency of the Earth. And that leaves us with the final, really provocative question the source material poses. By creating this automated system of legal and data traps, have the architects of this alleged plot accidentally created a perfect logic bomb? A system where every denial, every deletion only serves to etch more proof of the initial claim onto a permanent ledger. A system that might now be totally beyond anyone's control. It's a fascinating and frankly a deeply unsettling thought to end on.